Hi grade 6 and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to learn how to find the percentage of an amount. Let's get started. Now I know oftentimes I bet you ask yourself, when am I ever going to use this in real life? Well, percentages are definitely something you're going to use. Let's say Apple, by some kind of magical kindness, sells their new iPad Pro, which is regularly $799, and they decide that they're going to be nice enough to give us 20% off. Well, you probably want to know how much this iPad is actually going to cost you. So that's why today we're going to learn how to find the percentages of amounts. So let's take a look at our first example. Here we have 25% of 40. Now remember, the word of can sometimes be a clue to, that's right, multiply. So it's really like saying 25% times 40. But we can't just multiply 25 times 40. That doesn't make any sense. But we do know that the percent does mean per 100. So we can write 25% as a fraction, which is going to be 25 over 100. So now we have this, 25 over 100 times 40. And now this is just going to be a multiplication problem. So we can make this 40 into a fraction by putting a 1 underneath and just multiplying. So remember, to multiply fractions, we can multiply the numerators and the denominators. But let's remember, we can make this a lot easier if we check the diagonals first before we multiply. So if we look at this diagonal, we've got 25 and 1. And 25 and 1 don't have anything in common, but 100 and 40 both can be divided by 10. So this 100 now becomes 10, and this 40 is now going to be 4. So now if we multiply the numerators, we get 25 times 4, which is going to give us 100. And then the denominators, we get 10 times 1, which is going to give us 10. So now we get 100 over 10, which can be simplified to 10. So that means that 25% of 40 is 10. So here we have our first try it question for this video. We want to find 90% of 20. Now there are multiple strategies for us to use so that we can solve the percentages of an amount. Another strategy we can use is bar modeling. So we know from this problem we have 25 over 100 times 40. And some of us can quickly see that 25 over 100 is also equal to 1/4 or 1/4. So what we do have is 1/4 times 40. So if we were to use a bar model, we would then have a bar, and this whole bar would be equaled up to 40. And then we would split this bar up into 4 parts, and then 40 divided by 4 is 10, so that means each section is equal to 10. And since we only need 1/4, we only need one of these sections, and we can still get 10. So we can still see with using a bar model that 25% of 40 is 10. So here is your second try it question for this video. We want to find 75% of 32. And for this, let's try to use a bar model to help us solve this one. So here in our second example, we're going to also find the percentage of an amount, but we're going to use a ratio table. So we went over an example with a fraction and we used a bar model, and now we're going to look at a ratio table. So there are 3 different strategies that I'm going to show you in this video. So if we do this in a ratio table, we have 60% of 150 is what number? So we're going to have our labels for our ratio tables as part and whole. So 60% is a part of the whole. So remember, percent means per 100. So we're going to have 60, and then underneath we'll have 100. And then what we want to do is we want to get our whole to become 150. So if we can think of a way that 100 can become 150, so what we could do with ratio tables is we can divide and we can also multiply. So in this case, I could divide by 2, and whatever I do to the bottom, I'm going to have to do to the top. So now I'm going to get 50 and 30. And then from here, how does 50 become 150? Well, I can multiply by 3. So whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top, and then I get 30 times 3, which gives me 90. So from this, I can find that 60% of 150 is equal to 90. So here are two more try it questions for us to work on. So let's try to figure out what 10% is of 110, and let's work out what 30% is of 75. And for both of these questions, let's try to use a ratio table to solve these. So here in our third example, we are going to be going kind of backwards. So instead of finding the amount, we're going to find the whole. So in this question, we have 50% of what number is 48. So essentially, we have 50% times some number is equal to 48. Now, we can write this percentage as a fraction. So 50 over 100 times some number is 48. But we should see that 50 over 100 is also the fraction 1 over 2. So it's better to simplify this fraction now so that it's smaller. So, if 1/2 times some number is 48, then to get what this number is, we should divide 48 divided by 1/2. But now, why do we divide? Well, let's think about it. If 6 times a number is equal to 12, we know that this number is 2. But how did we get this number? Well, we did 12 divided by 6. So we can apply the same strategy here. So, 48 divided by 1/2, and because we have a fraction, we can make 48 a fraction by putting it over 1. So then we have fractions. So for dividing fractions, we want to keep it, change it, flip it. So now we've got 48 over 1 multiplied by 2 over 1, which is going to give us 48 times 2, which is 96, and then 1 times 1 is 1. So we get 96 over 1, which just simplifies to 96. So this means that 50% of 96 is 48. So here is your fifth try it question for this video. We want to find 15% of what number is 9. Now we could have also solved this problem with a bar model. So here we have our bar that represents our whole. And since we have that 50%, and we know that 50% means that we can split our bar into two parts, so then this section here, which is 50%, is 48, and then we can label this other section 48 as well. So now we can see that our whole bar is 96. So here is our sixth try it question for this video. We want to find 20% of what number is 10. And for this question, let's use a bar model. Here in our fourth example, we're also going to be finding the whole, but we're going to be using a ratio table. So in this question, we have 120% of what number is 72. Since we have 120%, it means that 72 is more than the original number. So we're going to draw a ratio table, and we can label this first column with part and whole. And our part is going to be 120, and our whole is still going to be 100. So what we want to do is we want to have our part become 72. So we have to think to ourselves, how can we make 120 become 72? So if we look at this first column, we've got 120 and 100. Both end in a 0, which means I can divide them by 10. But since both are also even, like the 12 and the 10 part, if we remove those zeros, if I divide by 10, that means I can also divide by 20. So I'm going to divide by 20 on the top and the bottom. So I get 6 and 5. And then 6 can become 72 if I multiply by 12. And whatever we do to the top, we do to the bottom. So 5 times 12 is 60. And therefore, we found that 120% of 60 is 72. So here is your seventh try it question for this video. We want to find out what 62% of what number is 31. And for this question, we want to practice using a ratio table. So from everything we just learned in this video, you should now be able to calculate how much this iPad would cost if Apple ever had some miracle sale. Can you figure it out? So from this lesson, we learned how to find the percentage of an amount, and we also learned how to find the whole, or how to find the original number. And we did both of these things using fractions, bar models, and ratio tables.